Greetings, salutations, and other big words. My name's Ethan. My handle is Wrangler. Welcome to Frequency Studios. Today we're talking about Shadow of the Conqueror. And with me I have a guest who has also read the book. Please welcome to the channel, Mr. Raven Nevermore. Raven, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you.
So here we are talking about the Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad M, which I enjoyed the heck out of this. Raven, what do you think?
It was a really good read. I'm detail oriented, and he's very detail oriented in the book.
Yeah, he is. I love that magic system of his too.
Yeah, that was quite different than what I was expecting, but it was very good.
Yeah, it kind of clicked with the way I think too. That's nothing I would have ever thought of, but now that when he laid it out, I'm like, that is cool.
Yeah, normally you're expecting like fireballs or something, and this had two different specific ways of focusing things, and that kind of made things a bit more interesting than just having one way.
Yeah. So, whoops, let me. I almost blocked my own self from the chat. That was something I meant to send you as a DM. It went into the regular chat, but anyway. Yeah, let's start off by talking about the world. He built a really cool world for this. Would you classify this as high fantasy?
Um, I'm, I'm not really quite sure because he does have some magic items, but they're more infused. Well, I don't want to give up too much information, but they're infused a certain way, and it kind of limits the amount of magic items that the people can have. And I think that's one of the things in a high fantasy is typically you'll see a lot more magic items. So in that way, I would say it's a bit less, but then there's also the way that they cast or whatever that there is on the high end, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, Kiko's in the chat.
Hey,
show
Kikomon.
me, show you, Kikomon. However, he is also busy with the puppy, but we'll listen in the background. Kiko, congratulations on the new member of your family. He's been psyched for this pooch for a while.
Yeah, congratulations.
And finally got to bring him or her, I can't remember, home. Yeah. His magic system is almost more like, even though yes, it's a magic system, it seemed more in line with like a physics system.
Yeah, enhancements and such.
Kiko said it's a her.
Although the external focus, I really wasn't quite sure how that worked. But they only kind of give like small examples, and then there's the one fight with the one guy. Because they have both the internal focusing, and then the other guy did the external focusing during the fight, and that was kind of different.
Yeah, I think he laid it out. Overlord Fluffy, how you doing? I think he laid it out. There's three types of users: light binders, light bringers, and earth binders. But I don't know. I can't remember. Did he define the earth binders in there at all, or did he leave that open?
Well, I know. So there's the light bringers, which were the healers, right? And then the light binders had, it seemed like two different versions. One internalized the binding, so you could increase your vision or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then there was the other type, which was like an external binding, and that was a thing where they really didn't go into what all they could bind to and cause effects with, except for in that one combat scene towards the end, I think it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going to try and keep this spoiler free as much as possible. I guess when we get near the end of the conversation, we could go into spoilers. We'll put up the warnings and all that. But, and the world, though, is so cool. For those who haven't read it yet, this isn't spoilers. I'm just defining the world he's set up. It's like the continents are not on a planet, but more like they just remain in space. There's like big continents like floating in the air. Everything around them is air, above, below, and there is a sun, and they have constant light. They don't have a day night cycle, but what they do have is, it seems like, well, it is, if you drop something off the end of the continent, it'll drop down, and moving at and when it gets down to the bottom of their world, there's like the air gets thicker. It's more humid and everything. And then I think they what did they call it? The Great Barrier, I believe.
Yeah, so there's two different things. The Great Barrier is kind of, or the way that I interpreted it was the Great Barrier was kind of like a circle wall around everything. And I think like if you drop something off the edge of the continent, if as long as it dropped straight down, it would just continue to fall until it hit land or something. Because basically, if you think about it, kind of like there would be like a bottom and a top to it, and once it hit that bottom like invisible surface thing, you would basically appear at the top again.
Mm-hmm. And then that's where the air is thinner, it's colder. But I think at terminal velocity, one full cycle is about a 24-hour period. And there's this one continent that they call the plummet. So it's just in a constant state. Unlike the other giant floating continents, this thing is in free fall. And this became their measurement of time. And so it would fall all the way down to the barrier and then appear again at the top and begin it. And that's how they don't say, they don't call a day, they call it a fall because of this constant drop. And the neat thing about this is it all depends on the physics, which come down to the sunstones and the dark stones. Now, the dark stones are repelled by sunstones. However, if there is no light touching a dark stone whatsoever, it becomes locked in space. If you take a dark stone, put it in a box, put the lid on, that box is just going to hang there because that dark stone ain't moving. But if it light touches it, it becomes repulsed and it starts to move. And they use this principle to develop technologies of drivers for their vehicles, airships, the whole 9 yards. And he was very consistent through the whole thing. I mean, he approached this concept like an engineer, and everything was just like, he put some serious thought into it. The drivers with the magnifying glasses.
Yeah, a lot of the things kind of seemed like steampunky, sort of, except for the fact that it wasn't steam driving it. It was these dark stones and the light affecting them.
Yeah. Now, it seems that even though it's said that the people in this day are human, if they are cut off from light long enough, they almost change into this borderline undead state and become part of a hive mind with something called the Shade. And
it kind of seemed like, well, maybe like early ones might sort of be seen as like zombies maybe, but then like the longer and longer that they last, they kind of develop into maybe sort of having a mind of their own, and then becoming like higher level undead.
Yeah, and I don't think he ever explained why that process occurs, but it seems like if they are not in contact with, if they're like out of contact with light for so long, whether they're closed in a room or whatever, then that change will start to occur. So I wonder if, this is, I think, the beginning of a series. I hope so. I would love to see more in this world. So I'm hoping he'll go into what has happened in there.
Yeah, no,
in the future.
He did say it is a standalone, but with the number of people that he's had purchasing it, liking it, and stuff, he's probably going to expand a bit more on it. But it might be a
awesome.
while, just because of all the other projects he's also wanting to work on.
Yeah, what is he starting to work on a space opera? Not to mention his YouTube career. He's running 2 YouTube channels and who knows what else. He's a family man. I think the guy is probably busy nonstop.
Yeah, I think it's maybe even 3 channels, because you also have Night's Watch, and then also what was the Shadlands. talking about the castle that he's working on building and stuff.
Oh, I only knew about Shadiversity and Night's Watch. I didn't know he had one called the Shadlands. I knew he called his property the Shadlands, which he's and then I got a kick out of it. One of the guys from Night Watch said, "Yeah, he's home with his kids. He's home with the Shadlands."
Yeah, I don't know how much stuff he's been doing on there. I don't know if it's like once a week or once a month or something. But the times that I've usually seen it has been like when major events have happened. Like they got some of the engineering plans for a section of the house done, and so they did a video on that and stuff.
Man, I would love to have half that drive, you know. But
yeah,
he's got to be busy nonstop. Yeah, but what else? Characters in there were. I love the character interactions between the two. I want to sit here and discuss this thoroughly, but I don't want to go into spoiler territory right now.
Spoilers are difficult. Let's see.
Especially when you learn how the magic system works bit by bit throughout the book. So I don't know if talking about the magic system directly now would constitute a spoiler or not. Kinda.
Yeah, I think we can kind of limit it to people's imaginations with talking about the fact that it enhances like your vision or your hearing or your muscles, depending upon what it is that you focus the light on.
Yeah, almost any physical or physiological attribute you could think of, it seems like they can bind to that and let it rip.
Yeah, although he does find out that in some instances he doesn't want to enhance things certain ways because they cause lots of trouble for him.
Yeah.
But that was also an interesting
aspect. Again, this is a spoiler, as funny as that was.
Well,
what was that?
I think it showed ways in which it was limited. In that, in some cases you might think, oh, well, you can enhance things, but how do you put limits on certain things? And I thought that was an interesting way to put limits on stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too much of a good thing, it starts to go the other way.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked was the flying boats, I guess, or flying ships. I don't know what else to call them, but it also kind of reminded me of some other steampunk stuff that's kind of set in the sky type stuff. Yeah.
It was almost a bit of a Final Fantasy feel because Final Fantasy seems to always like to have the airships in their fantasy. But these, it was like you knew why they worked and how it made sense. And though they would be like low tech by our standards, they can do things with simple concepts that we could never do in the real world, which was really cool.
Yeah.
The safety net around the city of the dark stones forged in place. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. And that let's see, I'm trying to remember what that reminds me of, because I've seen something similar in another, might have been an anime or something, or maybe I'm thinking of some old book I read. I don't remember. But I know there's been some other people that have tried to do things, and I was surprised. I was honestly kind of surprised that there weren't any dragons, because that's one of the things that he's talked about on his channel.
Yeah.
And the thing that you would need, and then they came up with the shield thing to protect themselves from the airships. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it seemed the wildlife in this book, it was a combination of some familiar and some completely created for the world.
Yeah.
But and then when he enhanced his speed the first time, that
yeah,
run up that hill and see what happens.
Yeah, that was interesting and made sense.
Just real quick, I want to say hello to Trippy Soul. How you doing? And Ragmar Verillion, aka Black Knight. What's up, guys? oh man, let's talk about Dalen, since he is the primary focus of the story. The the former Conqueror.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
What do you
liked it.
think of the character like that? Can a character like that ever truly be redeemed?
Um, that's a good
Yeah,
question.
this is purely opinion now. So
Yeah, it's one of those things where how exactly do you define the conclusion of that? If you go based upon a deity, then depending upon the deity's ideas and opinions, possibly just based upon human theology, um, that's something where he would probably need to spend his whole life helping people and may be able to come close. Um, but the fact that he wanted to do that, and if he could go back and redo everything, go a different route. Um, but in life, you can never go back. You can only go forward.
this is true. It's one of those things of sometimes you got to let the past lie and just do better.
Yep.
Although his was uh, his was not quite that simple. And all right, Trippy, we'll see you in a bit. Enjoy that book. Yeah, he's reading Faceless right now by James Craig.
Oh,
Yeah, I read that one too, man. That was good. Yeah, to give some background for those listening and may not have read yet. And again, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers, but this was all laid out in the first chapter anyway, and it's pretty much you get the gist of it just by reading the blurb. Yeah, he was a tyrant. Good evening, Royce. A drink with crazy is in the chat. Royce, what are you drinking? Yeah, he pretty much ruled almost the entire world, and he ruled with an iron fist in some of the worst ways possible. And now that he's gone through life, people thought him dead, and he's been in hiding, living a very simple life for the last, what was it, 20 years, I think, since he
yeah.
fell.
Yeah, I think 20 years.
Yeah, he started off with the plotting revenge, and it soon turned to a clearer mind of like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah.
And like he kind of, as time went on and he softened a bit and looked things more objectively, he realized just what a son of a gun he really was. I mean, he like couldn't live with himself.
Yeah, and 20 years is a long time, and it really the times that you do get to go back and look at different points in your time in your life and did I do the best that I could then, or did I think I did something good and then just did something bad? Um, that's a long period of time to be able to sit around and reflect on life.
Yeah, that's it's a great way to become truly self-loathing.
Yeah,
And uh, now the book starts off with him. He's old, he's decrepit, he's dying. Asher Burnett's in the chat too. Hello, Asher. He yeah, and again, it's like very difficult to have this conversation without going into spoilers, but
yeah.
it's early chapter. You look at the cover and you realize, okay, this is not, this is just the beginning of the story. So,
Well, one of the things that I would like to point out is like people think, oh, 20 years, that's a lot of time, but you can do lots of different things. And like today we have the internet. The internet can keep you entertained, but in this world and in medieval life, there was no internet. You had no way to be entertained for 20 years. Um,
yeah.
I mean, you might be
Well,
able to pick up a book,
well,
but
that didn't stop him from playing with tech.
yeah, true. Um, But you might pick up a couple of books, but then how often are you able to pick up a new book? how many times do you keep reading the same book over and over again? But yeah, he did seem to keep himself busy with tech. I think he helped tinker around and fix people's stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's what, yeah. In fact, that's what they called him, the old tinkerer. They had no idea who he really was. But as you can see when you look on the cover of the book, he's a young man, and that has to do with the inciting incident that where I think right before it happened, he was thinking if he could do it all over again, he would go around stopping people like himself.
Yep.
And that's when everything changed for him. I'm going to avoid saying that part, how, but it certainly did leave some questions, and they got alluded to with how the Arknights get their powers too, because they never revealed that part. So we don't know if they go through the same process he went through in order to attain them. But when he went through what he went through, he was restored to the. I think it was like he begot his body kind of reverted back to 17 approximately of age, and that's where he started learning about the abilities he got. He started practicing with them and actually experimenting with them. And as you mentioned, that's when he learned too much of a good thing can make it go very wrong.
Yeah. And considering his age and considering some of his other background things, which are spoilers, I guess, I thought that allowed him, well, I guess even with being a tinkerer, he tinker around with things. So that's kind of the way he learned his abilities, is he tinkered around with his abilities. And one of the things I really liked was the fact that seeing the cover, the characters on the cover, whenever he went in and described them in the book and stuff, I was seeing the characters on the cover, which I thought was really good, because some books I'll read a description about the character inside the book, and it's like, that doesn't look like what was on the cover.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I even got a little bit of that on my own cover. So, but
well, I mean, I liked it a bit extra because he has some, like you said, we think they may be human, or they may be something similar to human, but because he was going in and describing certain things about the colors of hair and this, that, and the other thing, and I was like, what exactly is that referring to? And you go back to the cover and you look at the cover and you go, oh, okay, that's what he's talking about. And so in that case, I found that really useful.
But he definitely a couple of times identified their race as human. And it was neat how he had like their different ethnicities, and a lot of it was signaled by their hair color.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and also,
I don't think there was too many of I don't think there were any just regular old blondes, brunettes, or redheads. It was either like a dark blue. They could have streaks of purple or red.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them had what we would see as a traditional hair color. But for them, that's all natural. But he said it, I think, twice in there that they're human.
Yeah. Let's see. One of the other things that he pointed out was cultural differences, because, like we were pointing out with the colors of the hair, he noticed one person had a hair color that matched one land, but the style of clothing that they were wearing did not match that culture.
Oh, by the way, Royce answered a question from earlier. I asked him what he's drinking. Gatorade, feeling under the weather. Hope you feel better, dude. I think he's got a game stream coming up in a little while, doesn't he?
I think he said that he was not feeling well today. I think he came home early from work.
He doesn't usually do that, does he?
I don't think he does.
That sounds very un-Royce-like.
Yeah.
Dude, I hope you feel better. Now, where were? Oh, yes, the cultures, different cultures, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I liked that bit of world building and stuff, and also some of the reasons as to um, like at least one character. I think he went into some of the background of their parentage and stuff, and why they ended up where they ended up. Because I think culturally they were completely different from most of the other people that were from the same race, and I think it was because their parentage were like they were ambassadors or something, and so that they moved there, and that is something that you do notice with kids of ambassadors is that they end up growing up in a different culture and they end up taking that culture on sometimes.
Yeah, like oh, my mind just went blank on his name. The the Lightbringer in the whole story. This is one of the
Oh,
main characters. Just went blank on his name, but he's Hamaran, or he's culturally Hamaran, but his ethnicity is Eurasian. I
that
that's
sounds right.
yeah. And then the Eurasians culture that was that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I was like that's some crazy thinking, but we've also got some crazy cultures here on planet Earth too, and now I'm talking about my ancestry, which is Celtic Germanic, and both have some crazy aspects to them.
Yeah, just look through the mythology. That Norse mythology must be one of the most off the wall mythos in the world. I mean, all of them could be a little off the wall to our thinking, but
Yeah.
Norse, I mean, it's just like Dr. Seuss gained godhood or something, you know?
Same with some of the Gaelic stuff. Some of the Gaelic stuff is really weird. People think, Irish and Scots and stuff, but before they ended up there, um,
You
there
got
was
Kernunos.
Gaul took up a large portion of Europe, and then the Romans came in and pushed them off. And I think most of my ancestry was because DNA traces back to like the northern section of France, which is like the last bit of the Celts that were still there in France, whereas the rest of them ended up fleeing over to the islands.
Yes, Black Knight, I will be reading more about the Tsarian culture. Don't you worry, I will be reading it.
Yep, I'm looking forward to book 2.
Yeah, I've only read Star Shatter book 1 so far. So,
Yep, same.
but was it Twin Sons
Corolla,
of Corolla?
I believe so.
Yeah, Kiko's read that and he seemed pretty happy with it, and I enjoyed the first one.
Yeah,
But Shatterstar series will get plenty more mentions on this channel. For right now, we're talking Shadow of the Conqueror.
yeah, and I'm looking forward to the graphic novel coming out. I got in on that,
I
uh,
did too.
and I'm looking forward to stuff showing up next year.
Yeah, I wonder when that. I am I'm psyched for that. I think I actually backed the hardcover version of that. It was like I couldn't pass that up.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember.
No,
There's been a couple of different ones that I've backed recently, and that may have been the one that I got the leather cover on, just because I've watched his stuff for so many years.
yeah, yeah. What got me hooked on his channel was the fantasy rearmed. Like,
Hmm.
you know, would elves really be using bows, or would And he goes into the upper body strength required versus their physique and their usual stats. And he was actually, I think he said dwarves might actually do better with bows because even though they can't draw back as far, they tend to be very strong, so they
Yeah,
can have that heavy weight and just and really let that snap go. But
and I think part
and
of
when
it.
he dives into that, it's so cool.
Yeah, I think part of that though is a bit deceptive, but he is talking about war bows, and so I do enjoy watching him whenever he talks about war bows and the 100-pound draw and stuff on those. But I think even if the elves use like 80-pound bows or something, they could still do some damage depending upon like which world you're reading through and stuff.
Yeah, because I
Um,
mean, typically an elf wouldn't I don't think there's any fantasy setting where I've seen elves have less strength than humans. They've always been on par with, and humans use bows pretty
Yeah.
damn good. So,
And then another thing is that I've been watching a bunch of Robin Hood and some other older things lately. But and I don't remember which one it is, but probably in a couple of them where they go through and they train some of the civilians how to do more archery and stuff. Now, granted, I don't remember what time period Robin Hood is in, but I'm pretty sure that's during the time frame when the peasants had to train with bows. But the question is, would they be practicing up to that poundage, or would they just be using hunting bows to hunt squirrels and such? I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be hit with an arrow from any poundage bow, but
No, definitely
yeah,
not.
one time I was doing archery in my backyard, and I was setting up. I knocked the arrow. I went to draw back and lift, and I got a little sloppy and accidentally let it
Ooh.
fly, and then I ended up with an arrow stuck in my shed. So I left that arrowhead in my shed door. So every time I walked out there and looked, I was reminded not to be stupid.
Yeah, yeah, definitely for sure. I did a bunch of archery in my day, although I think it was as a little kid, maybe junior high at the latest. But I don't know what pound draw that we had on those bows. They were probably like really light, 40, 50 pounds. But even
Yeah.
with that, you can, I think we had one person put an arrow clear through a hay bale. So,
Yeah, I think I had mine set at mine was a 75-pound bow.
hmm,
And so when he talks about the strength it takes to draw back on that, it took some getting used to at
yeah,
first.
definitely.
I'm a pretty decent sized guy, so I took to it all right, but it was still at first it was a struggle. I had to like get used to that and build up the right muscles to do it. So I mean, somebody picking up a bow like that just out of nowhere and using it, no, you're gonna need some time.
Yeah. Um, and something else I've been reading through recently has been the old AD&D rules. With the archery, like they say, most people can use most of the average bows, but then whenever you get into the specialized high poundage bows, like for the higher strengths, in order to get your strength bonus in there,
Mm-hmm.
other people aren't going to be able to use it. And they go through and they point out at most you're going to have like I think either -2 or -4 to even hit, and then you're going to be doing less damage even.
Yeah. Not to mention nowadays we're spoiled by things like compound bows with all the pulleys to help
Yeah.
make it easier. Those guys, they would take the bow, they would have to like bend it over their leg to string it, and then you know they couldn't make them as small and compact as we do now, unless they deal with a crossbow, which is I don't classify that as a bow. That's a different animal altogether.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I mean, it uses some of the same principles, but definitely a different beast.
Of course, Brynjar is going to shoot a 500-pound bow Black Knight. The dude's 15 feet tall and jacked.
Yeah,
I wouldn't pick a fight with Brynjar.
definitely not.
Yeah. Oh, getting back to the cultures in his book, the what was the name of that culture where they had the matriarchy? Do you remember?
Oh goodness,
I
that I don't remember.
yeah, but I liked how he laid it out that there's such a it was a matriarchal culture, but yeah, it had a very interesting balance. It's like it it wasn't like it wasn't like they you know men are scum. There was very much a good balance between the two, even though the ladies were in charge.
Yeah,
There was a give and take, and they worked together as a team. I'd never seen a matriarchal culture set up that way before. It was really neat.
yeah. It's not a direct correlation, but the country that they start off in Shield Hero is also a matriarchy, and it gets interesting and weird because I think the queen is actually, I don't know if she's exiled at the beginning or if there's some reason that she's not at the main capital, and so the king is in charge, generally speaking, but his daughters also have leadership roles, and so it's kind of an interesting deal of how that balances out. Because
Yeah.
when mom shows up,
Up till that point, the only books that I've read that had a strong matriarchal culture were Forgotten Realms, and it was the Drow.
okay,
So
yeah,
yeah, so you take that in contrast to this version, it's like night and day.
yeah.
Because that was very, but of course that was the intention of that, was to be a lopsided, because it creates an interesting story from which to work.
Yeah. Part of that also, though, is they worship Lolth, the Spider Queen, if I remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly,
Yeah.
and that's what, and part of it is the spider webs of intrigue, and so because it's all the intrigue, the women are more in charge of that, and then once combat actually starts, then in a lot of cases that's where the men show up.
Mm-hmm. But they're the drow, the women mages from the drow, they had some oomph behind their spells.
Oh yeah.
Again, if there's something you don't want to be on the receiving end of, so let's be glad it's in fiction.
Yeah.
So he started off talking earlier and kind of got into a bit of the. I mean, I love his world building. I look at that and I'm like, oh, it makes me want to do better with my own. It's like you read it and I was so into it that I'm like, it encouraged me to step up my own game, and so that's why I say that book is inspiring, because I love the world he built out, the physics to it, the different cultures. I mean, he put a lot of thought into it, obviously, because some of those cultures were very detailed out, and the way they don't necessarily mesh, even though they're trying to work together in some cases, some of the characters got real interesting. But
Yeah.
overall, this is supposed to be a form of redemption arc, so to speak. And so he could never undo the things he did, and he has to live with them. But I guess we're. Oh, have a great night, Black Knight. Yeah, it's 7 hours difference where he is from us. Well, 8 for you, I believe.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So
Good night, Black
yeah,
Knight.
have a good night, man. And let's see. I guess we're going to kind of start to get more into spoiler territory here. So I'm
I was
going
kind of
to.
worried seeing the map that, oh, this is like a floating island thing, and then I was kind of thinking, well, how big exactly is this? Because this looks kind of small. But then as he goes through descriptions of things, the various different wars that they cover and stuff, or that they talk about, um, it ends up making me realize that, oh, this is actually a lot larger than what you may think it is just by looking at the maps. And then with the floating islands on top of that, that gives you even
Mm-hmm.
more space.
Yeah, and I think there's more than just one big main continent. Aren't there a couple of continents that are? Yeah, there's a
Well,
couple of continents that they go back and forth between.
so
Not counting the plummet.
I know they talk about the great continent of Telos, and that
Mm-hmm.
has like all the different countries on it. And then they have the floating. Um, well, let's see.
I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's just
They're
called the
called.
Floating Isles.
Okay, well, they're the smaller continents. Okay, that's what it is. The smaller continents are the floating isles, and then there's two actual larger ones that are also floating, that are above Tellus. I think one of them is a Banadar or something, and the other one is Orden. But the thing I get from the floating isles, it sounds like it's a whole bunch of different smaller islands that are kind of grouped together, and probably each one of those has its own dark stone encased within, and that's the reason why it's not falling or whatever.
Right. Yes, the dark stone. Have a good night, Trippy. Yeah, the dark stone cores of these continents is what keeps them from moving, and so they would utilize that in some of the smaller islands to like open it up, and they kind of dig in and then use that attached drivers to actually move the entire island into another location. But I guess that was like one heck of a feat. That is like a lot of work to get that done to where they can do that. And once it's in place, they don't want to have to do that again.
Well, I think maybe like most of the main continents, like in time, whenever whatever was created, that's how they were created or something. Because I think also that now I don't know, this is just a rough guess, but based upon the numbers of the darklings or whatever the dark bad characters are,
The shade.
Yeah, the shade, that I'm wondering if that whole thing and the fact that those islands aren't moving, if like there's tons of it underneath to hold up that entire continent in place, because it's also not moving compared to where the different floating isles are.
Yeah. Let's see. And now we know every so often, since it's the sun shines 24/7 on this world, and once we get through some of the spoiler stuff, if you're up for it, I'd like to go into some speculation, some theorizing what might be going on and why the world is the way it is.
Okay.
But I mean, we might not have much to go on, but I mean, it's always fun to speculate.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So every so often, since the sun shines 24/7, it's always daylight. Every so often, night falls, they get a darkness, and that's when the shade come out and play. And some of these nights last quite a while. It's like many falls or days, as we would say, but again, in this world, one daytime period is considered a fall because they don't have a dark cycle.
Well, I think part of the thing is because the shades create darkness. And so I think if there's enough shades that are able to come onto the surface, they start creating that darkness. And then if there's enough of them, they can basically cover the entire, all of the continents with all that darkness that they just generate.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I was wondering, but I think there might be something a little more to it. It's not like the frequency of it is not steady. They expect it after so many years all the time, but it's never like an exact, oh, it's been this many falls since the last one, or this many years since the last one, so therefore we know it's going to happen now. It seems, like there's a margin for error on that, and
okay,
the nights themselves tend to last different lengths of time.
I kind of took it to possibly mean that they know it happens every so often, and part of that reason is because the shade have to build up their numbers. And then once the shade builds up their numbers enough, and that can take probably that length of time because they have to go and kidnap other humans and drag them into the darkness and have them change, because I don't know if we know whether they procreate or not. And so that's one question. Do they procreate, or is the only way that they're able to generate numbers is to go and kidnap people?
I don't know. Now the pirates, some of the nasty things they were doing, like turning people into shades to try and use them as a weapon.
That was a bad idea.
Yeah. I was getting at something earlier. he said that no matter where someone went in all of Telos, the sun always seemed to be the same place, same position to where they are. No matter how far in the sky they went out or came back, it seemed like the sun was always oriented the same way to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, your theory sounds far more plausible to mine after hearing it. But mine was, I wonder if it's an eclipse.
Well,
There's another world getting between them and the sun.
That could also be an issue. Because some of the things like he briefly mentions it and stuff, and I kind of read through it and I was like, oh, that was interesting, and then I kind of moved on and didn't think about it a whole lot until other things came up, and so I need to read through it again at some point, just to see if my ideas and opinions are right or not. And plus, some things we may never know until more books come out.
Yeah, if they come out, and I really hope they do. Like, I want to see if someone tries exploring the plummet. I'm sure they've had people in the past of that world already do so. But the way they can go from one continent to another in an airship, there's no reason they can't get to the plummet. They'll stay out from underneath it. But would they even be able to stand on there if it's in a constant state of free fall, terminal velocity? I mean, like if you try to set down on it, or is it just going to keep dropping out from under you? How would that work?
That was one of the things that I wasn't completely sure, because they do have the airships, but I'm wondering if they have to have something solid to, because that's another question.
They would have to anchor to it, I would think.
Yeah. And so that's a big set of questions. And maybe the thing is that they can't take the boats off the edge of the main continent, or else they'll just plummet. But that's an interesting question to dig through and figure out based upon the description of the Darkstone. Because another way of looking at it with the physics, you could probably just take a boat off the edge, like you were saying, off the edge, and go all the way out to the outer boundary. But then I think that's where the hard to move starts coming into play. And so I don't know if maybe people have, and then it just like turned them around and sent them back.
It's like some kind of repulsion field.
Yeah, maybe. But also, like, some of the stuff I'm not quite sure. Maybe is just speculation, but some of it, like that expulsion or whatever, kind of sort of reminds me of the way that the mists in Ravenloft work, because you can wander into the mists and you won't leave. In some cases, you may just turn around and basically walk right back out, and you've been walking straight the whole time. In other cases, you may walk into the mists and come out in somewhere completely different. But Ravenloft is weird. It's horror.
Sounds like a forest in Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, well, it was horror, so.
Yeah. Now, it was hinted at in the book, but never explained. How do you think Imperius keeps from shattering when coming in contact with the Darkstone?
There's numbers.
Yeah, he keeps count.
So there's the numbers, and then there's the smithy that he found and hid. And I think it's a combination of the two. I think maybe the smithy or the crafting bench, whatever that he used to create it, allows you to imbue it with some extra power or something. I'm not sure how else to explain it, but because of that, and I don't know if all gear like that has a number, or if the first time that they touch it, it like evaporates or whatever. Because that seemed like for most of them, as soon as they touched it, they would disintegrate. Whereas in his case, with the special bench or whatever, and probably some other information that he found out, he was able to create this, but it only lasts X number of uses against Darkstone, maybe.
Yeah, because every time he came in contact with Darkstone, there was the sound of shattering, but
Yeah.
yet his sword remained. So I wonder if he's transferring the structural failure to other objects he's got stored away.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Because
Yes,
he
Billy
did
Bob
have,
Sack insists that it's taco powers.
of course. Because he does have a number of other items that he specifically says that they are hidden. Plus, he also talked about uh, the great storage locations or whatever. And they
Yep.
found like one place, and he said, "Oh yeah, that was everything." But in the back of his
Yeah,
head, no, there's that wasn't what he was referring to. It was actually
he
other
didn't
things.
want anyone finding that forge ever.
Yeah. Well, there was a forge, but then also the supply locations. I think he had Imperial supply locations for the next time, um, the next Darkfall or whatever. Um,
Yeah, yeah. One of those was found. I mean, I think it was like I think that primarily what he didn't want found was where the forge was, because
yeah, the
I guess
forge for
finding
sure.
that would reveal some secrets he don't want out about Imperius. I think. Again, this is a speculation section now, so
Yep.
but but he did suggest to them near the end when he was captured that, yeah, hang on to those because you know another night is going to come and you're going to need that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one thing that I think he put together before he went into exile.
Yes. That. Yeah. I mean, the he pretty much designed a lot of the drivers that became common use while he was in power, as well as you know layouts of some cities and stuff. He had a big hand in that. He did as much as he did horrific. He did some really good things too, and I think that was supposed to be kind of part of the gist of the story: is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like condemn the bad he did, but also acknowledge the good.
Yeah, and it wasn't that he set out to do bad things. He set out to do good things, but he didn't care about the costs to get there. And that's
Mhm.
kind of, well, I guess initially he did, but then whenever his family was killed, that was the point where he just uh,
He lost
said,
his
okay,
heart.
yeah, no holds barred now at this point. We're going all the way.
Yeah, and that's what tortured him pretty much through the whole book. And then that one time you were talking about when you take in when you take the ability to enhance your attributes to too high a level, and he tried to enhance his memory to remember one specific thing, and in an instant in his mind clearly remembered every detail of his entire life.
Yeah,
Whew, that's
that
yeah.
could break a person.
Any better feeling about himself he was getting was just wiped out with that total reminder of who he was.
Yep.
In fact, it was so traumatic it almost killed him. Actually, I think it did kill him, but
Yeah.
regenerative ability wouldn't let him die at that point. It was like
Yep.
a punishment unto itself.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was one of the
Yeah.
things that I think that's part of the theology that Chad was going for in the book was you promise this to the light, and therefore the light wants you to take responsibility and do these things. And that regeneration, I think, was part of that curse.
Yeah, because I like the theology they have set up in that with the will of the light, and they pray to the light, and Even the way they use his name, they use the light's name in cussing.
Yeah.
Billy Bobsack asks, has Shad talked about a sequel coming out anytime soon? We mentioned earlier that we don't know. I hope so, but I think it says something said the Everfall Chronicles book 1.
Yeah,
So I
he
would
has.
think he's planning on it. I hope. Shad, if you happen to ever see or hear this, please, book 2. We're ready. Take
Yeah,
my money.
I think he is planning to do a book 2, but the thing is that he wants to do the All Stars next. That's the one that he's currently working on, plus the graphic novels for the first book. And
Yeah.
I think the graphic novels are going to explain a bit more about some of the like either the combat and some of the other things that he felt like he wasn't explaining as well. Because some of the things that he talked about, he wanted to go into more detail with some things, but just what he had in particular instances was like ended up being 2 or 3 pages worth of stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. It's like you want to explain all these details, but doing so becomes so long-winded to do so when you're just doing it with text that
Yeah.
it ruins the flow of the story. Whereas in the graphic novel, we have the benefit of visuals. And that saying, picture's worth 1,000 words. In some cases, that is true. So, I mean, I'm hoping, if anything, we'll maybe get a little bit of added context from that version of the delivery that through that medium. And then we can speculate a lot more.
Yeah. Well, plus we'll get to see like the armor and some of the other things because, yeah, we have the cover and it's got the airship in there, but like some of the other things, he goes into some good details describing, but then you might think it looks one way and I might think it looks another way, but then once they have the graphic novel, oh, that's what it actually looks like.
Yeah. So, do you think it's possible for him to truly become redeemed?
That I'm not sure, but I'm Shad has a lot of well, he probably has a lot of ideas at the very least, but doing a whole life full of superhero rescue things like he was doing in the book. I mean, he could write several books on that. But I don't know that that's what he's going to want to focus on because, like in the book, he went through several specific instances of things, but they didn't take away from the story, and especially in the one case where what's her name went along with him, and she was of the same mindset of this person's no good, got to kill him. But that was one of the other aspects of this was that a lot of the people that he saves the one kid on the pirate ship, but in a lot of cases they can detect light, and in a lot of cases people have a very dark side to them, and that was one of the things that he also discovered with the light bringer was that he also had a dark side, because he had fought with Dalen during the whole situation before he went into
Yep.
exile. And so that's one of the things where I don't know that he will ever truly feel like he's been redeemed.
Oh, he won't. I don't think so. I don't think he will personally.
Yeah, I considering like the next time he needs to torture himself, he can just go back through and relive all of his memories all over again.
Yeah,
But
as someone who's been stuck in my head, that's a superpower I do not want. Just
yeah, but in the light's eyes, maybe eventually he may be redeemed.
now, here's a bit of a different question. We know he was horrible at one point. Maybe not. He may not ever be able to truly be redeemed. But at this point, near the end of the book, do you think he's become a good man?
See, that's one of the things that I like the character building between him and the Lightbringer is that um, he he's kind of trying to go about becoming a good person the same way that he tried to go about doing good things whenever he was younger. And he gets pissed off with people, he yells at people, he brushes people aside and stuff. And that's one of the things that the book works on through his character. So he does have this character arc where he realizes that, okay, he needs to do things differently because he wants to be a better person than what he was. And that means changing a lot of his habits.
Yep.
And
Because
so,
even when he regained his youth, he was still inside a cantankerous old man. So
yeah. And so I don't know that portion of his arc is completely finished. I'm sure in the next book there will be a lot more of that because now he's going to have to go off and deal with the knights. And
yeah,
I considering how long he's been able to do whatever the hey he wants, I don't know that he's going to have a fun time having to do things that other people want him to do.
yeah. Do you remember what the knights were called in that?
Offhand, I do not remember.
Archons.
Archons, okay.
Which took me some getting used to because Archons are the name of a bad guy race in my book. So I was like, I see
okay.
Archons. They're supposed to be the good guys. And in my head, I see Archons. I'm like, villains. Oh, wait, no, they're not.
Okay, yeah, because initially I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense because in some mythology, and maybe just some fantasy stuff, that they're like angels or whatever, depending upon how far you go into
What
some of
was
that
it?
stuff.
I think, what were they? Were they called the agnostics? In real world mythology, I think they were called the agnostics. They talked about archons, but I'm I nobody quote me on that because I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm pulling from faded memories here.
same.
Yeah, I really did love the quabbling between. Oh, you know what? I gotta remember when I'm about to do a show to stop and relook up the names before I have a conversation and my head blanks out. Do you remember her name?
Goodness, no, I don't. I needed to do that too.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we both got home like minutes before we went live.
Yeah.
So yeah, because when you sent me that message, I just made it home. I was like, oh, good, because I did too. I just walked in the door as I was getting that.
And
But
you were right. Gnosticism is where the archons came from.
really,
Yep. The builders of the physical universe.
I was right once on a live show. This will never happen again. Write this date down. But yeah, but I love the back and forth. I like how they started bickering like a married couple at one point. But then when you find out the history that one of them was unrealized of, that made it hit kind of harder. It's like you
Yeah.
see all this really cool chemistry between the two, and then you realize,
Yeah.
this is going to go bad eventually, which is kind of a bummer. But
And
it ended up working so well.
and that's where it went. And I was like, had the past never happened, is probably. And so one of the things that I thought this might be was that this was showing him one of the things that may have could have been had he not gone the route that he had gone, but because of the route that he did go, this was never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of which, finding out that he did indeed have children and finding out after the fact he had killed the pirate lord and found
Yeah,
out, oh, that was my own son, and he killed him in a horrible way. Not
yeah.
not that he didn't need to be stopped, but do you think that would have made a difference in how he chose to end him?
I'm not sure. Um, it's one of those hard things because when you initially go through the encounter, he thinks the kid is just making it up. And it's not
Right.
until later that he finds out that, oh crap, he may have actually been. Um, and that's a situation where I don't know, maybe he was so brutal because he thought that the guy was claiming this false claim. And that may have been why he had been so brutal to him.
But at the same time, he very much was just like him.
Yeah.
And who did he hate more than himself? So it's kind of like the most messed up form of self-loathing I'd ever seen.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why I sometimes question, would he have killed him differently? Would he have stopped himself from killing him at all?
Um,
I would think he would have made a different choice, but at the same time, pretty much seeing this mirror image of himself, he might have done it anyway.
yeah, that's the thing. Now, I'm kind of the opinion he may, because again, we're at this balancing edge of he was bad, he's trying to do good. Would he? I don't know. But then the thing is that if he knew and he did kill him, he would not have killed him the way that he did kill him because he was brutal to him. I think he played around with him and then he shoved him on the mast or whatever.
Yeah.
That was just brutal.
And just a reminder, folks, this is spoiler territory. Yeah, so he goes full blown Vlad the Impaler on him.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was pretty horrific.
And so I think at the very least, had he actually realized that he might be his kid, I don't think he would have gone as far. I think he probably would have just, if he was going to kill him, he may have just lopped his head off or just something like really quick to get it over with.
Yeah. Do you think he would have tried to get him to change his ways?
And that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe, possibly, but
Yeah.
then I I don't remember on him specifically, but I know one of the things that he was doing as he went through the pirate ship was he was checking for how dark people were. And
Yeah.
the only person on that entire ship, well, on both ships that he saved, was that one kid.
Mm-hmm.
Because also,
But he did
spoiler.
notice a strong light coming from the pirate lord as well.
Okay, that was the thing
What
that
did he? What's the nickname he went by? Darkbeard.
I think so. I don't know. It was a very piratey name, but um, that was interesting sudden realization whenever um, he realized the Lightbringer had a good point whenever they initially took passage on the ship. Was that he discovered other things and realized, oh crap, I have a whole nother ship of people to kill. Um, Good grief.
Yeah, wait, when Lightbringer said, "What did you do to him?" He's like, "That's nothing compared to what I'm going to do if I find what I think I'm about to find." And that's when he found the human trafficking.
Yeah, and that's something where, oh goodness, just because I'm thinking of some recent events and stuff, because there's some people that think, oh well, we solved slavery with the Civil War, and it's like, well, that's just one
The
small bit.
overt slavery, yes, but there's
Yeah,
in that when we're talking primarily in U.S., there's it's happening around the world, and there's here's my tinfoil hat. People are being trafficked all over the place, even through here, and you know, nobody sees it happening. And they keep it out of sight for a reason because they know people in general ain't cool with that crap. And but it's still going on. They're called criminals for a reason, and I would love for all the lid to get blown off all of that publicly.
yeah,
Find out where they are, and I mean, people called it nuts, but then Epstein Island turned out to be a real thing. So
Yeah, and I actually know people that are working with FBI and local police on certain things, and we saw some of that work come out earlier this year or late last year, I think, where they cracked open a large ring and they rescued a bunch of kids. But yeah, that it's horrifying to find out that it's actually existing.
yeah, I used to laugh at jokes about that kind of stuff, and then one day, and then after finding out, oh wait, this stuff really is going on. This ain't funny anymore. You know,
Yeah,
I thought it was funny up until I found out it was real. I'm like, and it floored me. I'm like, no way. I mean, but then again, why do you think they have movies like Taken? Because that stuff happens.
yeah. Just because it's happening in the movies doesn't mean that it doesn't also happen in real life.
Yeah, I used to have that mindset, like, oh, that's fiction, but you know, and then when Shad details out, you know, how these people are being traded on a black market, and you realize, you know, it's pretty brutal, and you realize that stuff's happening in the real world. It's like, oof, this has got to stop.
Yeah, that was something that I also liked that was pointed out in Star Shatter. Because the one guy was not sure why humans were so against slavery and stuff, and then he saw the conditions and stuff, and then he realized.
Yeah. Thank you, Royce. Glad you're enjoying it. And boom, Overlord Fluffy says art imitates life. And yeah, in this case, I wish that weren't so, but I'm afraid it is.
Yep, and hey, Fluffy. Yep, reality
And
is stranger than
that too.
fiction. Very much so.
Yeah.
Some of the things I'm looking forward to in the graphic novel is how they visualize some of the ways that he focuses things. Like, does he get this weird look, or does he twitch
Yeah.
or something? You know, what exactly is he doing?
Maybe I'll have those wavy lines coming off his head like in Spider-Man. My spider sense is tingling. No,
Yeah,
but I like the fact that they can sense each other using their powers. That makes sense to me because if they're drawing on light, that means they can feel it, and if they can feel it, it makes sense. You could feel someone else using it,
yeah,
and I, it's almost a bit of that Highlander vibe. It's like I sense someone, you know, I sense another.
yeah.
There
I
can be
didn't think
only
about
one.
that. Yeah, but it will be interesting if well, it'll be interesting to see in future books how him joining the Archons may end up possibly increasing or decreasing people that volunteer for it. It will be interesting to see how the politics of that plays out.
Yeah. Now, more speculation territory. Do you think what he did, the process that ended up de-aging him and giving him his abilities, do you think it's the same thing that the Arknights go through, or did he find something different?
I th- I think it's a similar process with a light stone and a dark stone, but I think the process that he went through is different than what they go through. And part of the reason why I think that is because of the large number of people who die going through that process.
Yeah, but he also has four bonds as opposed to the Arknights all having three.
Yeah, that was another reason why I was thinking maybe the specific process that he went through was slightly different than what they went through. But I think both of them have something to do with having both a dark stone and a light stone. What I don't know.
Yeah, well, he never said, but it's one of those things where like he explains the world and the physics so well that when he shows us a difference and doesn't explain why, it gets you sitting there going, looking to dig for any lore that might be in there that might explain it.
Yeah.
And who knows, it might be in there and I just missed it. But I think he might be the type to plant in some lore hidden in plain sight.
Oh yeah. In some cases, we may have to go and read a second or third book in the series or something, and then go, wait a second, did he talk about that in the first book? And then go back and read the first book.
Yeah, when something that would look like a one-off comment turned out to be very significant later on.
Yeah.
So obviously you enjoyed it too because you're hoping for a second book as much as I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the next one will step it up a notch, or do you think he's going to be able to keep up with the quality of this first one?
That I don't know. It will be interesting to find out how that goes. One of the things that I am wondering is that, like, for another book, I don't necessarily require like a book two from this, but it would be interesting to see like another book that also takes place in this world, but following some other characters or something.
Yeah. I mean, he built an entire world, so he could have a bunch of different stories going on in different places that have nothing to do with each other, and it'll still fit. But a little more speculation. What? I mean, I got a harebrained idea on this, but what do you think the world is that they're in? I mean, they have a sun. They drop to the bottom of the world. They come out the top. Do you think they're within a sphere?
I think it may be more of a cylinder. Just or more cylinder-like, but then like the tops and bottoms could be curved. And part of the reason why I think that is because it seems like the side walls are the same distance apart. Because I feel like if you fall through the bottom and then you come out the top, then if it was a sphere, once you got too close to the edge of that barrier, you would be going through that loop a lot faster. And he doesn't seem to be going through the loop faster. He seems to be going at a consistent basis for the entire time, it seems.
Right. Yeah, because I was wondering if they were in some kind of strange planet, but on the inside of it. And, magic is a thing here to a point. So who knows how they warp from the bottom to the top. But, I mean, obviously the way he explained everything, he probably thought it out much further than he went into it in the book. I mean, it's like he's probably got plenty of details on how things work out beyond what he'd use, and that's probably a good part of what makes the world feel filled out.
Oh yeah. Well, he's also a big Wheel of Time fan, isn't he? And so
I don't know.
I think he is, because I think he has a bunch of the books on the shelf behind him. And so I think maybe...
It's tough to see the bookshelf behind him on my phone.
Oh, yeah, true. But I think maybe that he may be borrowing some things or maybe an initial idea from that. I'm not sure.
Billy Bob Sack said, yes, he is. He is a massive fan.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if that may have been where he got the idea for the flat world. I could be completely wrong, but that's also speculation, and that would be interesting to figure out how much of that is true.
Put this up there.
But I one of the things I think may end up paying dividends on the good that Dalen does is like he helped the pirate kid out and gave him some money and gave him the ship. and I think if he's able to continue doing similar things of helping good people in bad situations get their life flipped around and be much more productive and give more good, then that's a that's
Well, it's a
something.
step in the right direction.
Yeah, well, it's something. So if he's just the only person doing good, then it will be very hard for him to pay off his debts. But if he's able to help other people do good, that ends up exponentially, especially if they can further help other people do good as well. You can end up changing a lot more people's lives.
Yeah, and I do like how the kid he saved from the pirates became instrumental in the end when they couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
was also a very good portion of that story.
yeah, now now one character I thought was going to pop up again later on, but never did, was the wagon driver from the beginning. I thought he was going to be far more involved in the overall story, but like kind of after Dalen went off with the Lightbringer, we never saw him again. But I mean, I guess he served his purpose. I don't know why I thought he was going to be more significant than he was.
Well, so he's the wagon driver, but I think he's also the one that initially found the book,
Yes, he is.
and so we kind of do see him like once he gets back, but once he leaves the town, we kind of don't see any of those people again. And I think part of that may be just because they live out in the country,
Yeah.
and he I sound like he only took that trip like maybe once a month or something.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't really see a narrative reason for him to show up again. But I don't know, oddly, I got attached to that character right from the get go, and then he was just not in it again. So I can't even tell you why. I don't know what was so significant about him to me.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I've been looking at some of my characters is you know what, this character was actually kind of at least helpful to the main character. Is there a way that I can fit him in again later? And initially, I was thinking no, but I part of my problem is I'm going from something that happened within a well-defined Dungeons and Dragons world that I
Mm-hmm.
can't write directly from that. I got to put it in my own little world, and that's the thing where initially doing that, I was in a different area, but now I'm going through some even older writings that I wrote a long time ago, and I'm thinking, okay, I might be able to make this work a different way.
Yeah, I. By the way, I've been wanting to ask you: are you working on something that you're planning to put out to publish anytime soon? Or
Soon, no. I'm only into chapter 3 on this. The first two chapters came fairly well, um, but now I'm getting bogged down. Part of it is also the holiday season.
yeah,
And I've got other stuff going on. Um, so at this point, I'm kind of struggling to get through this final bit. But there's certain portions that I know what needs to happen and stuff. Well, the overall story I have is just filling it out, and so
yeah. I'm dealing with some of that myself right now.
plus moving it from the one world into the other, having to rework a couple of things. But I'm hoping maybe within 6 months to a year.
Cool. Yeah. One thing I hope Shad eventually does with this world he built, and I know he's building a whole universe now for that space opera,
Yeah.
but and who knows? Maybe it could be set in the same universe as this. I don't know what he's building or if how it could be compatible. But I'm hoping he comes up with a game system based on his world
Hmm. Yep.
because this would be fun to play in.
Well, he already does have a game system, but I don't know. I think the magic. he would have to do something specific to work in the magic from this book into the game series, because I think the magic that's in that RPG is like more normal spell casting type stuff.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Is there anything you wanted to point out that we haven't covered?
I don't think so, because we talked about the sword and the different groups and the airships and stuff. So I think it got everything that I was interested in talking about.
Yeah. And I have it up on the screen there on Amazon. Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad M. Brooks. Very much enjoyed this read. We both did. I definitely recommend it. Check it out, and I hope this becomes a good, hearty series, because the world building in this was just awesome.
Yeah, it was really good.
All right. Well, this was a fun chat. Thank you for coming on for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I hope to have you back again sometime soon discussing your project.
I hope to have that done soon, but then again, like I said, soon is going to be months.
Yeah, I mean, it for me, when I really get going on a book is, I mean, it took me about a year to do mine. And by the time I have the one I'm working on now, by the time that's done, it's going to be pretty close to a year for that. So, yeah, a year seems to be the cycle for me. So, I don't know. Everybody's a little different. I mean, not everybody could be James Craig, where the guy he cuts a finger and the story bleeds out. I mean, he's just gonna he's gonna make Stephen King look like an amateur. It's like, well, only 137 books. That's chump change. How many? Do you have any idea how many books Stephen King has out?
That I don't know, especially since he's changed like genres a couple of times. And so that left me confused as to, even because like one genre I don't even think I followed him in.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna call this one a show. Raven Nevermore, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the chat. This was a good time, and I look forward to having you back on.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you enjoyed this presentation, hit the like. If you didn't, I appreciate you dropping by. See you next time, and God bless.